Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills, the first edition, really, of the off season. Adam Benigni and Sal Maiorana, who had spent Thursday in Orchard Park at both of the end of season news conferences, and so that's really going to be our goal here, in kind of summing that up and projecting a little bit into the off season and into 2025. Sal, are you all kind of recovered, man? You got the RPMs throttled back a little bit now?
Yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of writing to do because there was, well, first of all, so many things were said yesterday during these pressers that reeled off about 12 or 13 story ideas that I could
Mm-hmm.
take forward here before the combine gets going in 4 weeks. So, yeah, it never really stops, Adam. As you know, the Bills beat outside of that week, or that month, and from mid-June to mid-July, things just keep going in the NFL, and there will always be things to talk about with the Bills. It just so happens that today we've got 2 hours and 15 minutes of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane press conferences to decipher. So wherever you want to start, I was there. I could give you my opinions, and we can rock and roll.
Yeah, I've rolled through, listened to just about everything, and there's a couple of points I think we want to hit and much more to get into. We should mention off the top here, this show will continue on a regular basis into and through the off season here on the Believe Network. First, a quick word from the sponsor, and then we'll get it going. The biggest weekend of the year is fast approaching, which means at Bet Online, more updated odds and props for Super Bowl Sunday, hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game betting, everything and more to enhance your game day experience. The world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting. Bet Online, the game starts here. I thought it was kind of interesting how, I think it was Jay Skursky from the Buffalo News, who's been a kind of a guest on this show, began the press conference with reciting one of Brandon Beane's quotes back to him, saying the last loss of the season, whenever the season ends, typically sums up in a lot of ways kind of what your football team is and what maybe some of the shortcomings are of your football team. I thought that was in many cases true with regard to the loss to KC in the AFC Championship game. And we can kind of touch on that, but it was a pretty apparent kind of statement making line of response from Beane that they really feel like this is a team that's knocking on the door, and if they keep knocking, they're going to knock it down. That's a great cliche, and I understand where they're coming from on that, and I know how thin the margins are, and this game was evident in a lot of ways of that, but to have this be a recurring theme and not be able to get over the hump, I guess my question to you in a general sense, how close are they, really?
Look, Adam, they're as close as any team in the NFL is to beating the Chiefs. The Bills have been the Chiefs' primary nemesis, and obviously we could flip that. The Chiefs have been the arch nemesis of the Bills, but look at it the other way too. No team has battled the Chiefs tougher than the Bills. All you do is look at the 4 regular season games in a row that Buffalo has won. You know what? People think those don't count. They count. Those games count, people. There's only 17 football games in a season. They're all big. This isn't the NHL, okay, or baseball. Those games matter. Now, it sucks that in the 4 playoff games, the Bills have not had the answers and they've lost, but they have been right there in every – outside of that first AFC Championship game, which Beane even alluded to yesterday, saying – admittedly, they weren't ready for that spot in that first season of 2020, and they weren't. But ever since then, they have given the Chiefs all they could possibly handle. 13 seconds went to overtime last year, and this year, the Bills are in the ideal position. Down 3 points, yeah, you'd rather be leading. But in this situation, you would rather be down 3 points with the ball like the Bills had in the last 2 years with Mahomes on the sideline, and you have your destiny in your hands. And they failed both times. But look how close – you asked me how close they were or are. That's how close they are. They have not been able to get over this obstacle. As Beane pointed out, hell, Josh Allen pointed it out. They've ended a lot of team seasons, this Kansas City team. It's just unfortunate that as good as the Bills have been – by the way, they have the second most wins since the start of 2020, the Bills do, behind only the Chiefs. Their reign here as AFC East champions, unfortunately, has come at the same time that the Chiefs have become a dynasty. It sucks. But what are you going to do? And they said yesterday, we're not going to stop. We're not content with being close. We know what we have to do. We've got to beat that team. So they're going to keep trying to do it. But they are close. They are incredibly close. And it just hasn't happened yet.
All right. So I think in order to frame how to get over that hump, I think we need to slide back a little bit here and open up the lens of what we thought this season was going to be. And this gets into some of the economics of the National Football League and everything. Remember, I mean, and I think you and I both agreed this was a transition year for the roster. But in one of your articles, I believe you began it with Brandon Beane's quote that they've got Josh Allen and they're not going to, take the mindset that they don't have a shot. But this is just what you have to do in the National Football League when you're paying, especially a franchise quarterback like Josh Allen, is transition the roster, move on from Diggs, eat that money, right? And look at the results this year. And we can talk for a long time about a lot of the reasons why, and everybody eats is the mantra, but what happens, the dynamic in that locker room. And I think we both agree the chemistry of this team and the close-knit nature of it was at a peak in terms of this was the best example of that under Sean McDermott, and there have been some good ones. Okay, but by and large, I guess the point I'm getting to is, again, that they come off another narrow defeat in the AFC Championship game, right? And a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, but they should be in a better position this offseason without having a real determination as to what the salary cap is going to be. But they made moves so that they could be better in 25 and 26 and moving forward for sort of the next phase or the latter phase of Josh Allen's career. That's the goal. And they should be in a better position to do that and address things in free agency and obviously through the draft as well.
Yeah. I mean, this was supposed to be, you said, a transition year, but the Bills really didn't think of it that way. They always considered themselves the best team in the AFC East, and they talk about it all the time. Win your division first and foremost, and then you take your shots at everybody else. They won 15 games this year, Adam, with a roster that just was not elite in any way outside of the quarterback position. They have a very good offensive line. James Cook became a very good running back this year, and Josh Allen's a superstar. Beyond that, they are pretty mediocre in a lot of areas. I was listening to Ross Tucker. I'm going to actually use this as one of my story leads at some point. But Ross Tucker had Greg Cosell on a few days ago. And Greg Cosell I really respect him. He is a tremendous analyst. He does a lot of work with quarterbacks, but he understands what's going on. And he flat out said, Ross asked him what he thought of this Bills roster. And he basically said that it is a mediocre team talent-wise. They have a superstar quarterback, but they are not elite in any position on the defense. I mean, they made it work with what they had, and they deserve to be commended for getting as far as they got within 3.5 minutes, maybe, of going to the Super Bowl with the roster they had. So it was a transition year, and they won 15 games. And as I just said, almost got to the Super Bowl with this team. You've got to commend the Bills. I know people were frustrated. They're aggravated that they didn't get over the hump, but there were so many things in that game Sunday that these little tiny things, McDermott talked about it, the little tiny details just on the last possession alone for the Bills. If things were just a touch different, they would have won the game. So they've got work to do with the roster, but you cannot say that this team did not overachieve this year.
Oh, yeah.
And Bills fans, as pissed off as they are, have to understand that.
And I think the biggest reason why, and Sean McDermott said this directly, the biggest reason for this team's success this year, for the outcome, for the trip to the AFC Championship game, was the evolution of Josh Allen, both in terms of his leadership and how he executed within this offense. We've spent numerous episodes on this show talking about his refinement this year, protecting the football, making the big play, but operating away from what we saw early in the career, the growth, mitigating the risk, all that type of thing. And it translated to so much. I mean, that was the foundation for the success they've had. And certainly it's going to be the foundation for any success they have moving forward. I mean, I if he's not the MVP, and look, we don't need to go have that discussion. We'll find out, next week or whatever, and we'll talk about it then based on the outcome. But if he's not the most valuable player, because again, it's not about numbers. It's how valuable is that player to his team. And Josh Allen could not have been more valuable to any team than he was to this one, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I'm not going to argue that point at all. I thought he was the MVP. Statistically, he's not the MVP, but for what an MVP should be, I think it's him. Look what he had to work with this year. I mean, I asked Bean the question about the Cooper trade. Like, why didn't it work? And he went into, he got hurt. He's learning an offense for the first time, coming in at midseason and doing that. Yeah, I get all that. But you know what? Plenty of guys get traded at the trade deadline and they fit right in and, make an impact. Hell, Devontae Adams for a shitty Jets team had huge numbers. He walked right in, started playing with Rodgers. Granted, they had a history before, but still, he made an impact. Didn't get him anywhere, but he certainly fit right in. Amari Cooper didn't. He got hurt, and he never really bounced back from that. There were so many things that, we could point to with this roster being, underwhelming in so many spots. And Josh Allen lifted all boats and got them to this point. So, they've got a lot of work to do, though. He might be the MVP of the league, but they've got to start putting some pieces around him, some better pieces, more top-end pieces.
Right. Well, we've talked about, the impact or lack thereof of recent top draft picks, whether they be first rounders or picks at near the top of the second round, that sort of a thing. And we can get into that. But since we're on the point of the offense and what they need, let's start at the receiver position. And I understand, Bean, I heard his response. He talked about how he put the stat out there that this offense, when Amari Cooper was on the field, averaged 7 point something more points per game. And I suppose that speaks to the point that you and I had discussed on numerous occasions, especially when he first entered the lineup, that his presence, a defense needed to account for more. And I'm sure there's something to that. But the lack of individual production, I don't think you can get away from that point. And you asked Sean McDermott directly on Thursday, do you need that A1 type receiver? And he said, to paraphrase, he was like, not necessarily, but they need some element, and it's got to be the right player and right person. Just your take on sort of his response and where you think they should go.
Yeah, I mean, look, for Josh Allen to be throwing the ball downfield to Mac Hollins in that game Sunday, and he did make two huge plays, that just can't be moving forward what the Bills are doing. They've got to find a guy who's going to be their go-to receiver. And Khalil Shakir has a certain role, and he is going to be in that same role next year. He's your slot receiver. He can be a go-to guy, but he probably is not going to be an explosive type player who's going to stretch a field the way an outside receiver would. The kind of guy that they thought they might have been getting in Cooper, and clearly that wasn't the case. They've got to be able to move the ball downfield, or Adam. There was a stat that came out, Josh Allen throwing the ball downfield this season, no team had less success throwing the ball when the ball's in the air 20 yards or more down the field than the Bills did, because they don't have anybody who can get separation and get deep on plays. It just wasn't there. Keon Coleman certainly wasn't that guy. Amari Cooper proved not to be that guy. Mac Hollins did it a couple times, but he can't be your go-to guy. They need that piece in this offense. They are great at quarterback. Their offensive line is outstanding. James Cook became a world-class running back this year, but in the passing game, outside of Shakir, they got nothing. I don't care. Right. I don't care about this everybody eats bullshit. That's fine, but they need somebody to get to the front of the line on that buffet and hog the food. And they don't have that player. That's got to be a priority in the offseason.
Well, that in practical terms to me sums up the narrative that, they're wasting Josh Allen's talent. Now, I don't fully believe that. They're not. I don't fully believe that, but I will counter with this, Sal. How the hell do you not have that in an offense when you've got a quarterback with an arm like that?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and they said Dalton Kincaid was supposed to be a key guy in this. Baloney. He's not that guy, not even close to that guy. I mean, they talked about him not being strong enough this year. Well, what are you doing? This is year 2, man. I mean, it was the same thing last year. He caught a bunch of balls. I said he set a new record for Bills tight ends for receiving yards and receptions. Pretty low bar, first of all, for Bills tight ends. But second of all, can you think of 2 or 3 plays that were even impactful last year? And then this year, there are almost no plays that were truly impactful from Dalton Kincaid. So that looks like a bad decision to trade up to go get him in the first round. Coleman is not going to be that downfield guy. I was just doing my story today for next week. His contested catch percentage, that was supposed to be his strength. He was like one of the worst receivers in the NFL in contested catch percentage this season. That can't be. You spent the 33rd overall pick on this guy. He can't separate, and he drops the ball. What are you doing? All right? They've got nobody downfield that can make a play. That's where you're wasting Josh Allen's great arm and the explosive ability.
That's the point I was trying to make. That's where that philosophically, I mean, I understand. You know what? Diggs was that guy, and then,
But even he wasn't a downfield home run threat, though. He wasn't a home run threat.
Especially toward the end of the season, his last year. He clearly, I mean, in talking to people inside football, had known he'd lost half a step or whatever, and he wasn't that guy. And so they need to address that in a very significant way. I think it's near the top of the draft. They will have, more money to spend in free agency, and all of that. And Kincaid speaks to kind of a new philosophy in tight ends and what that position is evolving to, and maybe in a different sense devolving to. But when you start hearing the term durability, which we did, and he needs to increase it and improve on his strength and that sort of a thing. I mean, that's a at the very least a yellow and maybe with a tinge of red flag.
Yeah. When he said that, and it's true, there's no doubt he's not a great physical. I mean, Dawson Knox is a more physical player. My thought was when I forget who it was, Bean or McDermott, maybe both said it. It's like, okay, well, what happened between last year and this year then? That's when that jump is supposed to happen. Is from your first to second year, you get that full off season for the first time as an NFL player. Why wasn't that happening because apparently it didn't, because he was the same player he was last year, only he got hurt this season, and it really took away even some of the effectiveness he had last year. That's problematic to me.
Okay. Defensively, I think there was a fair degree of admission that, while they performed well at times, ultimately that unit wasn't what it needed to be. And we can talk about the secondary. To me, and I sound like a broken record here, but again, it goes back to the first AFC Championship loss to them and being admitted that they weren't quite ready for it at a number of levels. The defensive line, that was certainly the case back then. And while they've addressed it and tried to in a number of significant ways, it's still an issue with this football team. I mean, I understand you want the speed, the ability to pursue, to be nimble, right? But they're just too light up front, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm seeing over a period of time. I mean, that speaks to philosophy and how this roster is getting put together. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to make that point and raise that concern in terms of items that are preventing them from getting over the hump.
Their defensive line has been underwhelming for really 5 years, especially in these elimination games every year. The 5 years in a row, their defensive line has underwhelmed. They just don't have anybody. The Greg Cosell quote that I just gave you, Adam, they don't have anybody that the other team has to game plan for. Like teams have to game plan for Chris Jones. He's a menace to society when he's on the football field. You have to know where he is every play. There's nobody on the Bills roster that brings that kind of cachet. Greg Rousseau is not that guy. You know who Greg Rousseau is, Adam? He's a first-round pick, a low first-round pick because of where they had to take him, obviously, who would excel if he had a true number one edge rusher on the other side. Right. He needs Bruce. He needs to be Phil Hansen to what Bruce Smith was. That's what Greg Rousseau is. He needs help. He's not that guy. Inside, Ed Oliver's 287 pounds. I mean, he just gets pushed around. He's a good player, but he certainly wasn't the number 9 overall pick. He never lived up to that status. Daquan Jones, enough. He's 33. He was okay, but he's not big enough and strong enough on the middle of that line. Jordan Phillips, enough already. For Christ's sakes, are we going to go to a 4th time bringing Jordan Phillips back? Quentin Jefferson, all these retreads. Dwayne Carter, I'm not sure he's the guy either. I mean, 3rd-round pick, he got hurt. I understand that. But is he really a difference maker in the middle? There's no way. He's a rotational 4th defensive tackle. They need to get bigger in the middle of their line, and they need to get a true dominant edge rusher. Those are probably the two biggest needs they have on the team, maybe even more than that star wide receiver.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I mean, we keep coming back to that point, and you just, again, elaborated as to the reasons why. We completely agree.
And what's disappointing, Adam, too, is all the work they've tried to do in that area. The high draft picks, the signing Von Miller. They've tried to address it, and they're not doing a good enough job. That's what's frustrating about it.
No question about it. All right, just I want to hit a couple of quick hits here before we wrap this thing up. The futures for, I'll throw out 2 guys, Matt Milano and Von Miller.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Von Miller, they have to move on from. Look, I mean,
agree.
You know, are you going to pay him? I'm not sure what the numbers are. It's still big money. Are you going to pay him to play 15, 16 snaps a game and that kind of money? No, done. Enough. He's 35. He'll be 36, I think, when next year starts. Enough's enough. Move on. You eat the salary cap, make him a post-1 June cut. You can spread out the dead cap between this year and next year, and you go find his replacement now. Find a true, an edge rusher who's not 36 years old. Go make a trade for Max Crosby. How about doing that? That's the move you make, right?
Yeah.
So you move on from him. Milano, it was weird. I think it was McDermott. I get it confused. There was so much talking yesterday. I think it was McDermott who sort of said, we've got to figure out, is he going to be available? You need, because unlike Von Miller, who plays 15 snaps, if Milano is going to be on your team, he's your 100% snap guy, and he's got to be able to stay healthy. So my thought, Adam, is that he will be back, because I thought he still played at a pretty high level when he was out there. And like I said, Von Miller, you move on because he's just a rotational player. Moving on from both of those guys would be a lot of dead cap money to have to eat this year when you're still in a position where the Super Bowl is right there. I don't think you want to take that big of a step back on the salary cap. So move on from Miller, but bring back Milano.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case. I think, as we all did, questions about Matt Milano with the accumulation of the injuries. I do think there is something. Well, I thought he played very well. They threw too much at him initially in that San Francisco game, right?
Yeah.
But
I did think the ramp up was too quick for him.
It was too quick. But as they got into the postseason, I think we saw the old Matt Milano, right? And I think that's a very valuable asset. And I do believe in their response and the point that they make, where now he's got an off season where he doesn't have to rehab, a significant injury.
Yeah. Now, you could also make the point here that we've just talked about how this defense just hasn't been good enough. Maybe you've gone to the well enough with Matt Milano. Maybe you do try to do something different. It's possible. That's very possible. I don't think that's going to happen, but that is one way of looking at it. If you want to change the defense, and I think there's no doubt, I think McDermott even recognizes this, and they did try different things. They did, for instance, in the Kansas City game, they played more man defense than they played all year. They blitzed more against the Ravens than they did all year. So they weren't just sitting back in their normal nickel and playing zone. They did try to do different things. But I think you've got the same personnel that you've had here for, probably the key guys at least have been here for a while. Maybe you need to do something different on defense, and maybe that means changing personnel.
Well, how much does Matt Milano have left? That's the question. right?
I
And
mean,
the wear and tear and all of those things. And we can, if you're going to be really aggressive and forward thinking about how you manage your roster, that discussion has to take place, right?
Okay.
I just feel like he showed enough this year that with a full off season where, again, he's not overcoming a major injury, I'm interested to see, because I still think he brings a lot. I think he showed that.
And I agree. I think they should keep him. I do think that.
Yeah. All right. So as for the secondary, the Kyer Elam situation, and I know Bean addressed it, and he talked about how he holds his head up and everything. But I mean, the minute Benford goes out of that game, that drop off is just way too significant and way too steep, especially when you consider a former first round pick. I mean, Rasul Douglas was a terrific acquisition, and Bean brought him in near the trade deadline last year or whatever. I mean, I think they have obviously a top level corner in Christian Benford, and you got to shore that up, that situation. I mean, but I think they need to, and they overachieved at the safety position. Cole Bishop is certainly a key piece of the future. But as you look at the secondary, what are your concerns and what direction do you think they may go?
Yeah, I mean, look, the secondary it wasn't good enough. I thought Douglas was terrific last year, getting all those turnovers right away. This year, I thought he started off very well. I mean, I remember there was some point, maybe around the Tennessee game in the Pro Football Focus grades, and they had Benford and Douglas both in the top 10 among cornerbacks from their grading. But I think as the season wore on, I think Douglas's level of play slipped a little bit. Benford was great all year, but I think Douglas was starting to show some signs. I think he's 30 or 31. So I think you move on from him. He's a free agent. I don't think you pay him to come back. So that's going to be an issue. Kyer Elam, look, we've been talking about him for 3 years, Adam. It's just a bad pick. They totally whiffed on that pick. And what was really disappointing is he's supposed to be at least semi-usable in man-to-man coverage. That's what he did in college. They went man-to-man in this game because that first drive, the Chiefs moved right down the field with the Bills playing zone, and they couldn't stop them. So they switched to man. That's when they lose Benford. And now you've got Kyer Elam, and you think, okay, well, he's at least a better man player than zone. Didn't matter. So I don't even know what you do with him. I mean, do you even keep him on the team next year? Because he's kind of unusable at this point. He doesn't play special teams, which I don't understand that, Adam. why a cornerback can't play special teams if you aren't doing anything else. So I don't know what you do there. We knew the safety position was going to be a crapshoot when they moved on from Poyer and Hyde. I thought Taylor Rapp was fine. The problem with Taylor Rapp, though, Adam, is he can't stay healthy. He was hurt 3 different times this year. That's like very Milano-like. They can't really count on him. Hamlin missed some time. Now he's a free agent. Cole Bishop, I think, was a mediocrity. I get he was a rookie, and he should be better in year 2. But they got holes in that secondary. Yeah. They've got some major reworking, and even their depth is not great. Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram, it's nice that they're UB kids. I don't know. I mean, are those guys you need on the field in a Super Bowl environment as your backups? It's a little bit of a roll of the dice there. They've got a lot of work to do in that secondary.
All right. So let's project a little bit. I want to talk about, again, get to Brandon Bean and how this, roster is put together and specifically the draft as they begin the evaluation process now. And they kind of ramp it up and look at whether it be second or first round picks. I mean, Keon Coleman, jury's still out. Dalton Kincaid, 2023. Jury's still out. Needs to be more productive. Needs to get stronger. Elam, we just talked about, 2022, first-round pick. Rousseau, 2021. I'm talking at the top of their draft now. Epinesa, 2020. Ed Oliver, 2019. And, of course, 2018 was Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds in the first round. Yeah. Not good enough.
No, not at all.
Not good enough, not impactful enough.
Yep. The Ed Oliver, Ed Oliver's been here for 6 years, so I guess you say, okay, I mean, he's given you a lot of playing time, but he has not lived up to that number 9 overall pick, right? Epinesa is just a guy. I mean, I was okay with them re-signing him last year as a rotational edge rusher, a guy who knew the system. They like him. He's a culture guy, but he's just a guy. He'll make a couple plays and then he'll disappear for 2 or 3 games, right? Rousseau, as I just said earlier, he needs a dominant guy on the other side to be the player he truly can become. I think he's very good against the run. He will flash as a pass rusher for sure, but are you going to pay him, Adam, after this? After they've already exercised the 5th-year option, that'll play on for like $13 million next year. Are you extending him and giving him $20 to $22 million a year? I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good enough idea, right? So what are you doing there? And then we've already talked about, like you said, Elam, Kincaid, and Coleman. They've got to be better at the top of the draft. They have not hit home runs. He's finding guys like Terrell Bernard in the 3rd round and
Benford 6th round. Benford 6th round pick.
Yeah. I mean, they've done okay with a couple of those guys, but you've got to hit more on these 1st and 2nd rounders than Brandon Beane has. It's just the reality of the situation.
All right. Anything else you need to add, or I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Covered a lot of ground. We still got a long way to go before the combine, so let's save some of the info for future shows. Let's not blow the whole thing here today, but I think we covered it pretty well today.
All right, so I want to talk about as we continue. First of all, for those who are regular listeners and viewers of this podcast, thank you so much for your support. This was our first year. This show winds up in a lot of different places, from all of Sal's articles and some others at the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, obviously on YouTube, SiriusXM, NFL app, Apple, Spotify, however you view this, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it this year. And so we're going to continue on. I think initially in the offseason, it will be more sort of in response to things as they happen. Look for one of these things to drop where we feel we need to address a significant development with the team. But this is going to continue. I guess our point is the season's over. This show is not. This is going to continue on a regular basis.
We've still got scouting combine, which I'll be at the end of February. The draft process starts. We've got free agency coming in March. There'll be roster churn from now until they get to St. John Fisher. So the NFL is never really out of the news. So you'll be hearing from us, maybe not 3 times a week, but certainly at least once a week, I would think.
Yeah, I think on a weekly basis, and I think we may have something to say about the Super Bowl too. Maybe as our next show.
The world is Eagles fans this week, right?
That's right.
Go Sirianni, the Jamestown guy.
Listen, man, I have known you since, I think the first time I met you was when I was in Syracuse. I came to Buffalo in 97, but started at WSTM, the NBC in Syracuse, from 91 up until July of 97. And I was at Locust Hill Country Club in Pittsford, right? And covering the Wegmans LPGA at the time. Yeah. And there was this guy behind me, and I'm like trying to figure it out. And, and there's this guy behind me in the media room who's just sort of fuming. And he's going to turn around, and it's Sal Maiorana. And here we are. You are who you are. And listen, it's been a pleasure, man. We've done a lot through the years, and this has been a nice, we did a segment like this when WGRZ in Buffalo and the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle were owned by the same company. That has since changed, but we had the opportunity to do it. And when this chance came up, I couldn't think of anyone better to turn to than you. And you have more than delivered, my friend. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you and our friendship and all that. So we do make a good team. The 2 oldest guys on the beat, basically. Well, you're not quite as old, but I think we offer a lot for the listeners here, and we appreciate everybody watching and listening. Thank you very much.
All right. You got to thank you. I agree, Sal. And so for Sal Maiorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, as Bill's coverage continues there full time, I am Adam Benigni, WGRZ TV, and Sports Talk Live Buffalo continues through the off season as well. We hang that up for the summer months, but we go through June, Monday nights at 7 o'clock. Always something to talk about with the Buffalo Bills. So it will happen on all platforms, including this one. Thank you for being with us here on Believe in Bills.